Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is October, and that means that time is finally here again. It's time for Halloween, time for those horror fests, time for those scary movies you watch late in the night and you can't fall asleep. So now it's time for some more scary movie reviews. I cannot wait. I am so excited for this month. I've been deciding on so many movies to talk about. But today I'm going to start off with a movie that is actually turning 50 years old. Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What happened was true.
Every time I watch this movie, it always goes through my head, what was Tobe Hooper thinking when he came up with this idea? Because I already know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the elements of the plot are based off real-life serial killer Ed Gein. But to come up with the idea of a crazy, lunatic, cannibalistic family, one of the members of the family being the most iconic slasher figures in horror movie history that chases you around with a chainsaw. I mean, it's just like, what was going on? What was going through his head when he came up with this idea? Kind of makes you think. The first time I ever heard the title Texas Chainsaw Massacre was actually when I was around 10 years old. And that was actually the same time when I saw the remake version that was made by Michael Bay. I will say I actually watched that one first because that's the one I thought was the original. And it scared the shit out of me when I was really little. But as I got older, it came to, understand that this is just movies. This is a Hollywood movie. But then later, when I was maybe around 13, that was when I found out that this is actually a remake. And, the 1974 one was actually the first one. This is the original. And even though these two movies are the same story, they are very, very different. Like 2003, that's all movie. That's Hollywood. But this one doesn't say movie at all. It actually says documentary, in my opinion, because the way it's shot is so different. And if you didn't actually know that this was not a fictional story, you would actually think it's like a true story. And you're like, oh my God, these are real people getting butchered and hung up on meat hooks. You're like, oh my God. And I think that even amplifies the horror. There's some people who believe that Texas Chainsaw Massacre actually focuses more on the people who escape, Leatherface and his family, but I don't think that at all. Texas Chainsaw Massacre focuses morely on the killers themselves. And since the movie is shot like a documentary, that makes it even more disturbing and creepy on the fact that these people who get dragged into their lives and, the killers just carry on their lives like, normally even with these people with them. And they just can't help but be disgusted by these killers because while they're carrying on their lives, they're eating human flesh. So, I mean, it's just even more morally disturbing to be shot this way and to focus more on them. And that just amplifies this creepy and disturbing factor that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is known for. One of the most iconic scenes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and probably a lot of fans' favorite scene, is the first kill. Because, when as the movie's going on, you're waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for that first kill to happen. And when it finally does happen, when Leatherface takes his first victim in the movie, it just happens in such a natural way.
Hello?
Runs up on that door, wham, splat, you're dead. And then that door shut, that was intense as well, because when I first ever watched this film, I thought that was sound effects, but no, that boom, that was echo from, Leatherface slamming the door so hard. And then after that, you don't see anything else. You don't know what's going on after, he dragged the body back there and shut the door. So your mind starts to, think like, what is going on? What is he doing back there? And that's one of the beauties of that scene, is the fact that you don't know what's going on. You don't know what he's doing or what he could be doing. One of the weirdest things I've always found when it comes to Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that even now, 50 years later, it's still considered one of the goriest, bloodiest films of all time, yet it's essentially a bloodless film. I never understood how that worked, how a bloodless film could be considered one of the goriest films of all time. It just doesn't make sense to me. But another interesting fact about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that it is one of the movies that originated the slasher genre, because Leatherface was one of the first characters to be considered a slasher. And a lot of famous and iconic villains that followed after basically followed the same concept that Leatherface has. So you can say that Leatherface was a key character in horror because he is probably the original element that you look for when it comes to villains in slasher films. If you guys haven't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if I might add, it's definitely one I recommend you guys see this Halloween, because it's one of the most iconic films of the 20th century, and according to Hollywood, one of the goriest.